Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Whovian Complex. And I almost went with Doctor Who in Review, but no, that's our former name there. My name is Louis Lacal. You've probably seen me on Man Bites Media. But, of course, more importantly, we got three amazing guests, or two amazing guests and a co-pilot. So let's go with our co-pilot first. Joe, join us and let us know a little bit about yourself.
Well, hey everyone, this is Joe from Diversely Geek, and I'll be joining today in lieu of Nisha M, your geek mom, just taking over for tonight because, trust me, if she can do the episode, she will always be doing the episode.
And that's why you have the rusty start that I did.
It was something.
Yeah, it's me. It's definitely me.
It was exactly. But yeah, so we're here tonight to discuss the episode. Can we? Is everyone okay to say it? Are we like?
Let's say it.
Tongue-tied with it, or
you will try. You will do a better job saying the name than I will.
Fugitive of the Jadoon.
Because if I try to say it, it'll sound like the Jadoon. It's never a good thing. And of course, we also have our other guest, Mollee B Marcus.
Hello.
And the amazing Mackenzie Flohr, of course.
Hello.
Yeah, and so thank you both for joining us. And Louis and I are going to kind of co-pilot tonight's episode.
I'm coining that phrase.
Yeah, I'm definitely, at least I assume, the youngest Whovian in the crew. So I think I'm going to have an interesting perspective, which is why I always love whenever I tend to listen in the background, by the way, during the episodes, and I'll nod and think about the things that everyone's saying, and so it's really lovely to have the expertise of everyone on this show. So, and I've been enjoying listening to the episode so far. So, thank you for joining us on this journey, both our guests and our listeners.
Yes, indeed. So, what did you want to start off with as the first point, Jyoti?
Oh wow! So the Jadoon. Fugitive of the Jadoon. I think this was, so personally, I had a lot of mixed feelings. I guess we can kind of just start with all the throwbacks.
Yes, that was the best part, I think.
Yeah, my biggest, I don't know if it's a concern or it's not even a criticism. It's just, I feel like the first season did such a phenomenal job introducing the world of Doctor Who to a brand new generation and just people in general. Anyone could have watched it and have followed on completely. This season, as we know from the beginning, has been different. It's gone right back to all the classic Doctor Who references that do require a bit of knowledge. And I think it's been interesting to see the view of the companions being the audience members who have no idea what's going on.
Yes.
So I kind of want to start off with that. How do you all feel with, in general, this episode, but how the season's been tying in from what we've seen now with this episode in particular, all these threads that are coming together in what's a similar aspect to the way previous seasons have handled Doctor Who?
Let's start off with Mollee on this one.
Sure. So this was a roller coaster of an episode. I believe my emoji was by the time I was done with it. Just from Harkness to Two Doctors to Gallifrey and energy coming out of walls. I mean, it just, you name it, this episode had it. To me, from the get-go, from the starting block, this has definitely gone back to kind of classic New Who. I really feel like they are pandering a bit to the fan base. I think they were a little bit scared they were going to lose us, I think, a little bit because of some of the episodes. But I think that at some point, I don't mind, exploring some of these other threads that they were going on. But it definitely is kind of back to, I think, what we are used to as canon, used to as some of the other things that are coming through. So, I mean, personally, I'm enjoying it. There are parts where it gets a little too campy, like in last week's episode where the makeup and some of the costumes kind of threw me off. I'm like, oh, they're so bad. So why are they doing it so badly? But, so those kinds of things throw you off. But I'm enjoying it so far. I want to see where it goes. They pepper in some of the political stuff, like in Orphan 55, they still had some of those political messages coming through. They weren't as preachy. I think, and also the last couple episodes were not written by Chibnall. This was part written by Chibnall. This one. So,
and you could tell. You could tell because he was going back to that style that the fans have always wanted back in last season, and you could tell that, like Joe was saying, that it is fan service, but it's fan service done right. This feels very much like the Moffat era, again, with that arc, that grandiose arc that's going on that you're expecting.
Like Davies. It's very Davies to me.
You think so?
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly.
Because the way that things are being peppered in lightly, it's not like this arc. The only thing that may have been a little Moffat-y was beware, like the Cyberman, which is like an overall arc, but like kind of the little things here and there. And there's, I kept telling Mom when we were watching it, it felt very, in my opinion, at first it felt very disjointed, and I didn't know why. I was trying to figure out what the flow, like what was wrong with the flow, and then eventually, when we got to the big reveal, I was like, okay, it's getting there. It's definitely not I don't think it was as much of an inconsistency in the writing as I thought it was at first.
I think also it was kind of supposed to be suggestive of the Doctor's mental state as well. It felt very much like the Doctor was narrating it at the beginning. So this was how scattered her brain was because of the issues that are going on in the back of her mind. So I think that's why they did that kind of disjointedness a little bit, at least from a filmmaker point of view. That's usually why they do that kind of aspect in writing. But now Mackenzie has this amazing theory that I've been holding off until the end to have her do this because it's going to blow all our minds, everybody, including the listeners. So Mackenzie, it's your turn.
Ooh, yeah. So I also am responsible for writing the Binge Watcher Guide to Doctor Who. So having all this stuff from the past coming to present is very exciting for me because I started as a author in this series, writing from Jodie, so I consider Jodie my book doctor. But now I'm going back to the other characters, and I'm starting, actually now I'm working on the 9th book. And there's so many correlations between this season and going from, say, with Chris Eccleston. We'll start with that. There's actually, I have so much lore that it's just unbelievable. So
she's very 9.
Yes. Yes. And she's also a little bit like 7 in the aspect that in this episode, I mostly related to her because she did a lot of what I do. When I shut down, if I have an episode, I'm like, I get angry, I push people away, I won't talk, I will just kind of do off and do my own thing, trying to distract myself with doing whatever I can. And that's essentially, I thought, what 13's doing. She doesn't want to tell the companions because it's not that she doesn't want them involved, it's just that she doesn't think that she could connect really necessarily with them and doesn't want them to get involved in the point that somebody's going to get killed. I mean, we don't want, with the Cybermen coming possibly back, which of course we do know they're coming back because we've seen it, that we just don't want that to happen. I mean, I was thinking when I was watching, I'm like, please don't have another episode where we have another companion right in a row getting killed by the Cyberman. I don't think my heart could take it. So the first thing that I want to look at is the lore of Ruth. At first we were like, okay, this is just a new character. And then there's this like, boom, whoa, how can she be the Doctor? When we have 13?
Child.
Yeah. So the very first thing for evidence for this episode is I'm looking at the book Rose, which was a Target book written by Russell D. Davis. And in there, he has a scene with Clive and Rose. And Clive is showing Rose pictures of the different incarnations. He shows Chris Eccleston's version. He goes, but there's more. Look at this. So he says, and I'll just read this from here. He goes, a blonde woman in braces running away from a giant frog in front of Buckingham Palace. A tall, bald black woman wielding a flaming sword. Indicating that is the next incarnation after 13. So our next incarnation, number 14, is supposed to be a black woman who has a sword. Could it be the sun? We don't know. And it's supposed to be bald. Well, Ruth isn't bald, but it doesn't.
She could be very easily.
She could be. Yeah, she could be very easily. So that was the first thing I looked at. I'm like, okay, could this be the real Dr. 14? And that's why Jodie's doctor doesn't recognize, but yet we've got this alternate TARDIS. So when I listened to the episode, when the character,
but it looks like her TARDIS.
Yes, it does look like her TARDIS.
Except the inside doesn't.
Yeah, but the inside looks more of like a classic. Now, there is a theory that was told in the 5 and 2 Doctors episode. And for those who are not familiar with the classic episode, this particular episode dealt with the second Doctor. He was regenerating, and during his regeneration, he gets pulled from his timeline and is made to do missions by the Time Lords.
Yep.
So when he comes back, he looks older, and he can remember Jamie and Zoe's departure. He's given a new TARDIS, he has multiple new generations, and he's eventually returned to his timeline with an erased memory. But he's now John Pertwee. So we do have the possibility that Ruth could be from that perspective or that time frame. But I don't think so. I think something more is going on that meets the eye. We could have an alternate timeline. I do believe that this monster is not Jodie's monster. I believe this monster is connected to Ruth, that they're one and the same, or they're from the same timeline. And with the alternate timeline, we know the Cybermen from 10 knows that there are alternate universes. They just don't know how to get there. We also know that the companions are told by Captain Jack, that there is a group that has sent back something that is supposed to defeat the Cybermen. But they forgot to tell the doctor that information. They just told her, we ran into Captain Jack. He warned something about the Cybermen, that they've been destroyed and that they can't come back. That's pretty much all they said. And that Jack was...
Well, they said not to give it what it needs, what it wants.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Which sets up a whole chain of events that I think are going to be playing out throughout the next season. And I think it plays into a lot of the aspects that Mackenzie was bringing up. And if that happens, people are going to be putting this season down in the record books for Doctor Who, because let me tell you, that's going to blow a lot of people's minds. Yes. And hopefully a lot of people that have been deterred from the last 2 seasons will see the error of their ways and realize that we're back to Who again. We're back to Doctor Who where everybody was complaining about and all that stuff. Everybody gave it so much grief last season. There is no basis for that at this point at all. This season has proven that. And last season was set up for this, which is what we all said last season. We said this is set up. This is what they always do with the Doctor. They always set it up so they could go all out in the next few seasons. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're going all out, which is pretty awesome.
I got a question for you guys. So we hear, how it's an abomination for the 2 Doctors to occupy the same space at the same time. And it would destroy the time stream. And that the Doctors seen Gallifrey destroyed twice. Why do they not know that? Gat and Ruth. And the whole thing about, that she's serving at the glory of ash and bone, right? And that these Gallifreyans, these extra Gallifreyans that happen to be here, they're like, well, this is an abomination. So what did you guys think of that whole thing, and why the time-space continuum just didn't go when they were like next to each other, if that's supposed to happen?
Well, that kind of fits into where I'm going with the mind blown for those who are listening. I don't believe the Ruth is the Doctor. I believe that the Alliance has sent back a thing, which is Ruth. Now, Ruth being the timeless child, we do see in an episode previously, there is a blurry image of a woman who is African American and is wearing robes, the Gallifreyan robes that very eerily are similar to the colors that Ruth has underneath her jacket.
That's right, the purple.
Yep.
So the other thing is the TARDIS is buried. She says her parents were buried underneath. Well, if she's the timeless child, she's connected to TARDIS. So TARDIS is kind of like her mom and dad. Who else does that sound like? Who else does that remind you of? I believe this is either an alternate version or it is our River Song from the Forest of Dead, who has been taken out from the library, doesn't have a proper body, so it has to be put into Rose's body, and now the timeline has got kaboom.
Look at this. I got two.
That's the same thing I said. I lost my mind when I saw that. I was like, what? Oh, man, that sounds great.
But I think but now that you say that, her behavior, the way that she's handling the gun, it's total River.
It is so River. Yeah, even with I know that there was a lot of people who said, well, why didn't she act about the Sonic? Why didn't she recognize the Sonic?
But also what she says. Yeah. But also what she says, I'm the Doctor. I'm a traveler in space and time, and that thing buried down there is my ship called the TARDIS, but you're going to love this next bit. River said that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, shut up.
Yeah. Joe, so what do you think?
I have a lot of thoughts.
Spit them out.
Oh my God! I'm like, oh.
I think I'm trying to touch on everything. I did.
Mind blown. Yeah.
Error.
Explain.
So I feel very torn because I personally adored last season. And this season has felt very different. It's felt very
old too.
It feels like it's a mix of Moffat and Davies, and while I loved both of them in their own time, I still want this to be very fresh and stay. I don't want it to try to be something that Doctor Who was, because it is already on its own so brilliant. I'm worried that it's going to. It's not even the fan service of it. I'm worried that it's going to get too caught up in the lore and make Doctor Who a bit confusing, because I do hope that they are aware, and I'm sure they are, that they have a lot of new viewers, people who did come in for the last season, or even with 11, which most people did, and maybe if they have gone back to watch 10. There's a lot of things that I think they're going to pull forward from Classic Who. My thoughts on the Master and all of this were that I know that it was discussed in the other episodes, but I still think it's the Master that's before Professor Yuna.
Professor Yuna, yeah.
Yeah, and because it would make sense. But then the fact that she's still looking for the Master and said something about the Master being stuck in the that realm that they're stuck in, I wonder if those beings are going to come back into play in a way. And
maybe
I know somebody had mentioned a theory of how they felt like they were similar to Cybermen.
Yeah.
Yes, I think I said that.
And I could see that. I could see them being the Cybermen, and maybe what we saw was inside their brains.
Which is what. So
I thought it was circuitry.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that they take Classic Who and the feel of Davies and Moffat and turn it into what they've already done with last season, which is keep it fresh, keep it new, keep it different, but pay respect to the spirit of Doctor Who and Classic Who. I think it's very possible for them to make a lot of ties and references to the OG Master back in Classic Who. And when we were watching the episode, Mom was mentioning a very specific character that she thought that Gat was, and personally, I think it would make the most sense as an alternate timeline. But then it's Doctor Who, so it could be 20 different things. That all makes sense. I do like what Louis you said about it being the perspective of like the way it was shot from the Doctor, because that makes me feel a lot better by the way this, because the director did a great job by the end. So I was trying to figure out where that like cut was. So it makes sense that
this season is a lot more cinematic and it feels more like a movie. And the last season was too. It was very cinematic. So we're seeing a lot of film elements in these last 2 seasons. So you could start really grasping at like, you know, the angles and stuff like that. There was a lot of angles when the Master was presented. They did the skew angle, which is supposed to confuse you. It's supposed to give you that sense of like what's going on and all that stuff. So they're using a lot of like classic film angles to kind of give that emotion and give you like little hints.
It's very different. And I think like the 2 episodes ago, or from 55, it was also very, or 3, I don't know, can't keep track. The way that was shot, I kept thinking there's something so different about this. I feel like that kind of hit the nail like on the head right there. With it's very much the Doctor's perspective, because the entirety of the last season was so fresh and bright and open, and it's because it was from the companion's perspective.
Yes.
And
the companions have been kind of out of the picture these last 2 episodes.
Exactly. So that's what I was just thinking is, so far in the last season, everything was we were learning about the companions and how much like their companionship meant to the Doctor. And this season has been very much the Doctor as well self-isolating. So we can see where that I am now understanding kind of where that disjointedness is coming from, with the flow of coming from the last season into this one. I hope that they do it justice in the companions. I feel like they've kept their characterizations. They
have very well, actually.
It was really
Sam's been a little campy though.
That's the other thing. Like it feels like they're being a little. Well, of course they're being underutilized a bit because they have to be, because the focus has been on other things. But it was nice. I will say, Yaz seems a little. She's grounded, but a little airy-ish is what I felt from this.
What do you mean by that?
Like not all there.
Yeah.
You think so? Because the first thing she did when the Doctor was like, "Oh, who's going to go talk to the Jadoon?" She's like, "I'm a cop. I'm going to go talk to them. I speak their language." And she jumps to action. I was like, "Yes."
Oh, she felt
but the minute.
Go ahead.
But the minute that they get spirited away by Harkness,
she gets thrown to the wayside. Yeah.
Yeah. She's always getting thrown to the wayside. I
will say I did like Ryan, and he was like, "Well, oh, you're my favorite," because of the way Ryan spoke to him. I did like that, and I liked Graham. I liked Graham and Ryan's interactions. I felt like, and it's okay because there's 3 companions, so they can't always all shine. I feel like Yaz did go to the back burner a bit this episode, and so did Gat. I was hoping that we were going to see more.
We're going to see more of her.
Especially with that.
Promise that.
Well, that
Gat
specifically.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The
cat was destroyed.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
It's time. It's very like
wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
Exactly. And there has to be a protagonist that's going to continue on, and that's going to be Gat. Like there has to be somebody that comes back, or the mastermind.
Was the master? Do you think that Gat was the master at first?
No. I don't think so. I think she was a high-ranking soldier for the Time Lords. But there has to be a mastermind if it's not her. And I want to see who that mastermind is, because that's where the source of everything's going to be for this season. And it could very well could be the Master. Maybe the Master made that illusion of Gallifrey destroyed because it's all an illusion, which is what the Master is a master of, pun intended. You know, like how many times have we been twisted with the Master? How many times?
I will say, I felt the Jadoon at the end of it were kind of useless. It was nice to have, it was nice to have them come in. I actually like the Jadoon though, because they have a code and it's nice, and the doctor was, trying to work with them, and then just ripping the horn off. That was actually the one thing I was like, why did they never, like, what? How did the doctor would never do that in any form? I could never see.
But River would.
Mm-hmm. That's why I was like, oh, that's so River. Yeah, when that happened. Especially also, if you notice, even after when the doctor's talking about Gallifrey being gone, the one thing about River, she's always been able to ground the doctor. So you're like, oh, okay, the doctor's getting angry, and Rose is just standing there like, like it's almost like in her eyes you could see, I already know. I don't need to ask any of those, what happened to Gallifrey? I already know because I'm River.
Yeah. And also, I love the Jadoon. I love the fact that we actually got a realization that there was a female Jadoon and that was the leader of the squad. I was like,
I love it, and I personally, I love the Jadoon. I love that.
Freaking love them so much.
I wanted to see them like be treated better, which kind of sucked.
Yeah,
they're like the what do you call it, the ones from Hitchhiker's Guide. They're very much like that.
Vogon?
Yeah, the Vogon. They're very much like the Vogon. They have this bureaucratic system. They're very just like one-minded.
Maybe it was a nod to Douglas,
Oh yeah, I'm sure it was.
Could be.
I'm sure it was. But oh my god, I loved this episode. This episode, it explored so many different topics, and it does what Doctor Who does best. It leaves us with so many questions, and questions that we're going to be asking for a while. This next week is going to be crazy.
What do you think was Harkness's real role, other than he really wants to see the Doctor in her new form?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you think it's going to be because he's coming back to help her with the Cybermen? I mean, what do you think is going to be his role coming up?
Mackenzie?
Go
ahead, Joe. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I was just thoroughly surprised that they would even consider bringing him back, because they've been so clear on Torchwood is gone. Unit is gone. Well, they kind of clarified that a little bit.
Is it now? Is it?
And maybe its timelines are just all messed up right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he was so glitchy.
There's something that I brought up with Mackenzie off air, was that maybe what we jumped into this season was an alternate timeline. With that first episode, we got taken to the what do you call it, TARDIS crew got dropped into a different timeline, and that's why there's a different Doctor. That's why there's a different what do you call it, captain character. All these characters are completely different. So maybe we have River that is from this alternate timeline. Maybe that's why Torchwood doesn't exist and the Doctor's confused by that. That would explain all these plot holes that we were kind of like, what? How did this happen? Maybe they got dropped into that alternate timeline instead of them, the alternate timeline people coming over to the Doctor's timeline.
Exactly. And I think that there is definitely a plausible explanation for that, because if we look even at Rose's alternate timeline that happens in the audios currently.
Yes.
In the audios, she is currently trying to get back to the Doctor. So she's going through all these different universes of Earth to try to find either Clive or her parents or the Doctor to see, does the Doctor exist? And she's finding the Doctor's not existing in these other worlds. But as a consequence, every Earth that she goes to that's not her Earth, it's instantly destroyed after she leaves it. So it is, we know that if you mess around with the timelines like that between alternate universes, that can happen. And because Yaz was taken out in the very first episode to wherever it was, that Matrix, and now her DNA has been been wibbly wobbly there, she now can go through the different universes and not have that same terminal effect, because she has that DNA switch. Same with the Monster. The Monster would be able to do that. The Doctor would be able to do that because already he and she had done it during Rose's time. So the only ones who really haven't done that would be Graham and Ryan.
And technically Graham and Ryan were gone for a while, so we don't know if that actually happened. And maybe when they did the scoop, they brought him over too. That could also explain that as well. So I mean, it could be various things. But we are actually running into our break right now. So let's take a quick break and we'll be right back again with another section of the Whovian complex.
As the songs of awakening rang through, the world was created. The silence was broken.
Middle-earth, with its rolling hills, broken mountains, flowing rivers, and beautiful forest, was created.
Cellar Door is a journey into the mythology, the mystery, and the beauty of Middle-earth. Sit back.
Close your eyes.
And imagine.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to this episode of the Whovian Complex. We are here discussing Fugitive of the Jadoon. And it has been a pretty stirring conversation so far. We've really gotten into, well, the multiple timelines and theories that everything this season has touched on and that we might be seeing more of. So let's just get right back into it. I am very curious. Where do we see this moving forward now that we have a potential second Doctor in the same existence and timeline as another Doctor? We have Jack Harkness coming through with information about Cybermen and impending doom, which is not something that we're unfamiliar with. I think I liked most that the Doctor was able to catch a break last season without having a season of impending doom.
It was low stakes. This season, not so much. The end of the universe is nigh.
The Doctor is looking for this master, and we've seen another version of Gallifrey fall.
Yeah.
If it's real.
Yeah. Because like we pointed out, the master could be playing tricks on the Doctor again.
So with this next episode,
even the cat agrees.
With this next episode, we know that it's going to be somewhat tying right into the end of this one. So what are your ideas and thoughts and theories on what we're going to see with an immediate follow-up? Because both Doctors are still together. The Jadoon are gone. Gat is gone. The Doctor is looking for the Master. The Doctor knows that Jack just visited, but now has some foreboding message about Cybermen.
A single Cyberman, yeah.
I think that we're gonna get an adventure with the two Doctors, quote unquote, and I think that we're gonna start getting a realization of what this other Doctor is, what Ruth Doctor. Coin Ruth Doctor instead of the Doctor, as the see what she has to offer and how she starts interacting with the Doctor, and we could start getting real clues and hints to see who this really is, because we don't. None of us
gonna stick around in this next one.
Oh, I think so. I think that's going to develop across, and I think it's going to lead into the Captain meeting Ruth, and that's when everything's going to get revealed. Captain is going to reveal what is going on, because I'm sure he knows. And he's going to be like, hold on a second, no. This is who that is.
He didn't even know what regeneration the Doctor was, so how is he going to know about Ruth?
I mean, neither does... I mean, a lot of people didn't know. The Master didn't know either. The what? I don't know. I just don't think that... I think that Jack is clueless about some things, but not all things. And I think that would be a nice way to tidy it up in the end, at the end of the season, honestly.
Well, I mean, I was totally surprised. Like, when they landed in the ship and I heard his voice, I went, Really? That was just like, all right. But and just Graham like, I'm not the doctor. And then each one, but because it was when all of a sudden Graham picked up the pastry and he's like, oh, what's this? And he like, and he's just kind of like, okay. And then at first I'm like, oh, where did he go? And then that disembodied voice, I went, I know that disembodied voice.
Right.
But I don't know, I don't know, Mackenzie, I think you're onto something with the river thing, because even the mannerisms and the voice, now that I think about it, I think you're onto something with the river.
And then now it's hard to not think about that. But then in that case, so if we go with that theory, how would that be possible?
That she escaped the library?
Yes. Somehow she would have gotten out of the library. So we know she's currently saved. That's saying that this is our river. It could also be a river from an alternate timeline. Like, even with Captain Jack.
That's what I think.
I'm not even 100% sure that Captain Jack was our Captain Jack.
Right.
He could have been an alternate.
Well, so to that point.
Because also Captain Jack, actually, that uniform was not the last season of Torchwood.
No.
So that's not the last image that we saw of him.
I was like, that is young Jack.
Yeah.
That is not, that is during Tenet Jack, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So that supports the alternate timeline theory that both of these are from an alternate timeline. And how about if it is the Doctor, and that's just alternate timeline Doctor?
I feel like that's more so where it might go, just because if they go with River, it's going to be a lot to explain, because River did not have any regenerative powers left.
Unless it's in between. Before she gave them up.
Yes, because we have young Melody, who was an African American.
Yep.
So we have that. So we know that River at one point was that. So she easily could have. Or we could have maybe the Alliance did, by sending her back, did the same thing the Monster did. The Monster's in an alternate body. He's not in his body. So
he stole a body, yeah.
Maybe River stole a body.
But what do you think about like that, the light and the breaking of the glass? Because I think that harkened back to something also.
That harkened back to the what do you call it, the timepiece.
Yes.
The John Smith, remember the John Smith thing too?
Yeah, Mom actually was able to point. I don't know if it's because she saw spoilers or because she did notice. She was like, "There's a weird familiarity about the flashback kind of thing that Ruth was getting," and as soon as there was that moment of breaking the glass, I was like, "Wow, this is very much reminiscent of that." And I think that the writers did a phenomenal job pulling from Doctor Who from classic to now, because there's so many little things that this is really picked apart that was pulled, which is it kind of makes it feel like it's a timeline explosion.
Yes. Yeah. That's exactly what it is too. And there were some other things pulling back to the lighthouse, that there were similarities, where some of the things that some of the people were saying on Facebook was the one thing that I caught was the wristwatch, how it's watching at the beginning, it's ticking to 800, which is exactly when the toast pops. So it being 8 o'clock, so I thought, okay, 8. And then she refers herself to taking the lighthouse in 1999, and the 7th Doctor was shot in New York in the Doctor Who film in 1996. So we have that, there's that correlation to that. And then we have the lighthouse at the top. It kind of looked like a little bit of a TARDIS because it had that light, but it also has a clock in it that would have the doomsday dong that we'd hear in the TARDIS. So that the question that I would have is, if it is an alternate Doctor, why did not the TARDIS go doomsday when Ruth and the Doctor are both in the same TARDIS at the same time. It was like Ruth's Doctor didn't even recognize it. Now, if it was River and the Doctor, that would make sense because it's not the same person. It's just probably another chameleon effect where it's making her mask that she's the Doctor.
But they scanned as the same person.
Well, so how do we explain two TARDISes in the same?
I mean, we got it in the 50th.
Well,
and many times.
Yes.
But every time there's two Doctors,
The
TARDIS gets confused. So it didn't.
The TARDIS was confused.
Ruth's TARDIS?
No, our Doctor's TARDIS, the 13th, like it was acting up, and even the Doctor was like, "Why don't you tell me what's going on?" Right at the beginning of the episode, she was like, "What's going on with you?" Like she was talking to the TARDIS, and saying, "What's going on with you?"
I think the reason Jack couldn't get a reading wasn't because of the Jadoon field. I thought it was because possibly it was reading the signature of another Doctor.
Very much so.
It's very possible.
But I personally, with all this timeline talk and that possibility, my question from this season, after the season premiere, has been, we've seen through many timelines the fall of Gallifrey. Mm-hmm. So what is shaking this Doctor so much to the core about this particular fall? Why does it feel, personally, but the way I feel like this Doctor is portraying the fall of Gallifrey to be as if they've never experienced it before?
I think it's probably the line from the Master that everything in their lives is a lie, and I think that the Doctor is trying to figure out what lie that is and confirming what lie that is.
I think it could be the timeline.
And I think it's left the Doctor a little bit frazzled trying to figure that out.
Also, we have to realize that we had talked about this on one of the first episodes of this season, was that the Doctor's gone through the different stages of grief. Now, the last stage, it's the Doctor is able to balance that line and balance all the past and learn from the past. That's why we got last season what we had. Yeah. But also, if something happens that triggers the Doctor back to relive a traumatic event, which is 100%, the Doctor's face when she saw Gallifrey was that face of like, it's all coming back, it's flooding back. And that's why she completely ignored the companions on the side, because that's what you do when you're going through one of those moments of PTSD. Everything in the world doesn't exist. It's gone.
Right.
Nothing exists. It doesn't matter how much you love them.
It felt very, very much John Hurt.
Yeah.
Oh, the War Doctor?
Yes. Like, all I could think of every time we see the flashback to 13's face, seeing Gallifrey, it feels like this is in some way, the most, like, truest fall, the most finite fall of Gallifrey. Because with the War Doctor, you would think nothing else could really get to the Doctor in that same way with what was mentioned about, the children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So honestly, I personally keep questioning, what is it about this lie or this fall of Gallifrey that is really making it so much harder for 13?
What do you think, Mackenzie?
I'm thinking it as somebody who does suffer from PTSD, is that she has been triggered, definitely. I think that maybe she is blaming herself, that she feels somehow responsible for Gallifrey going kaboom again, because here she went back in time we go to the 50th to try to fix those events so that it never happens, but yet it was like as if it didn't matter. It's now happened again. So I think she's thinking that maybe something she did that has made the Master so angry to do this type of event again. Who in the world would just snap and take out the whole universe of their own people? it doesn't really make sense. So for her to logically try to think of it through, and she doesn't want any of the companions to be involved in this because it's her problem. It's her home. Her companions, as much as they say, we know who you are, that's why she keeps saying, no, you don't. You don't know who I am. Because from her perspective, no, they don't. All they know is she's an alien from a planet called Gallifrey. That's all and she can change faces whenever she wants. That's pretty much all they know.
And maybe the Master's lying too. Maybe he didn't destroy Gallifrey. Maybe someone else did.
I think so too.
Maybe it's
I also believe that. And it's also possible that maybe the Cybermen are behind this. Maybe they were the ones who destroyed Gallifrey with the Master. That's why they have been taken down to being basically nothing. Because, whoopsies, we destroyed a planet. And it's not like going back to John Hurt's Doctor. John Hurt's Doctor in the audios actually did commit genocide and destroyed planets during the Time War. So he's not totally innocent either.
No.
Yeah. That's why also if this is the Doctor, it very well could be in that time period, right, either before the John Hurt Doctor or after the John Hurt Doctor. Because technically we don't see that regeneration.
No, but it would be a big jump to put in another regeneration, considering how they had to...
Maybe it's not a regeneration.
A stolen body?
Yeah.
I would go with that. But also from lore, going back to lore, if we go to the High Council can give regenerations really anytime they want. They've done that to the Master. The Master they gave who knows how many times. And with 12's time, when he went to Gallifrey for that period of time after Hellbent, Raslin had asked him, well, how many regenerations did we give you this time? Like as an alluding that, we can give you generations as much as we want. And then we also have the issue with 12 where he says he remembers the Master when he was a kid, but he doesn't recall that the Master was a girl, and he can't recall his own gender, nor can you really remember things. Everything's kind of pretty foggy right there. So that kind of indicates that that's during Pertwee's time where he was in that alternate timeline.
Do we think they're going to tie together Gallifrey and the Master that we see from 12 into what we're seeing now with 13?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're going to see it a much darker... The way that she's losing hope at this point, she is in an episode where she is trapped in time. Even knowing all these things that are going around that she's trying to figure out, she's enjoying that because it's making her be herself and be the Doctor as we know now. But once something happens again where it very well could be when she tracks down the Master, because that was the first thing I said. I'm like, she is not going to let the Master stay in the Matrix. She's going to go find him once she sees that Gallifrey's really gone.
Yeah.
She's going to ask that. And that is probably going to set off the ultimate trigger where she's starting right now to somewhat self-sabotage. But if she gets to the point where she gets sometimes with PTSD, it can get so bad that you could be talking about something and that person experiencing the PTSD, they don't even know where they are. They don't know. Yeah. They completely think they're back in a different time zone, and yet you're talking, they can't hear you. They're just stuck in that. And it's scary when it's like that. Not only to the person that's witnessing it, but the person who's experiencing it. And I can see from my own self, I have experienced that before, and it's not cool.
Same. Yeah, it really does feel like that out-of-body experience, and it really does affect you in a different way. And when I saw the Doctor in this episode at the very beginning, I was like, whoa, okay, that's what that is. 100%. And even when Ruth and the Doctor were on the ship, and Ruth was like, shut up, don't say anything. Like, that hit the Doctor hard. Like, you could tell that was more than just like, oh, why are you being like that? You know, why are you telling me to shut up? It was more than that. And I was like, ooh, okay. We hit a sore spot with that.
Yeah, I have a feeling that Jodie's making a decision to pull from Peter. And his intense experience with Hellbent and Gallifrey and the Master, because essentially 12 just resolved like a lifelong tension and lost so much. And I can see why it's hitting 13 so hard. If you put it into perspective, how much 12 had to go through with the Master and Gallifrey to then come back to a complete and utter shock of another regeneration of the Master and the fall of Gallifrey. It does make sense, and I think Jodie herself probably has something that she's contributing to the writing or the directing of the episodes in a way that pays homage to all the Doctors, because I can very much see all the Doctors. Mackenzie, like when you mentioned 7, I was like, yeah, I can see that. Because he was very aloof and close, but also distant with his companion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I definitely see that. So moving forward, it's going to be also interesting to see how the companions are going to react with Ruth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be interesting. That's going to call for a lot of different things that could actually open up the door for many things. Let's actually start heading into our closing comments. Jyoti, do you want to go first on that one?
I mean, honestly, that pretty much was it. I do hope that the writers, the directors, and the team do definitely take this in stride and take into account that they did a phenomenal job with this last season and tread very carefully in creating this impending doom arc again. I will say they did wonderfully with pulling very particularly with what they have pulled. So I'm sure it is going to be great, and hopefully, I mean, you can't appease everyone, but hopefully the way that it's done leaves little plot holes. And I personally am looking forward to when finally the companions are brought into her grief and her PTSD and her struggles.
And I think we're going to see, at least me personally, I think that we're going to see a lot more merging of the companions and the Doctor. I think that we're going to be seeing that at the end of this season, the second half of the season, honestly. And we're going to start seeing that come together from last season, developing all the different companions, all their personalities and everything, and the Doctor's personality that we saw at the beginning, first half of this season. And we're going to be able to merge that together. And I think the saving grace of the Doctor is going to be the companions. I think the companions are going to ground the Doctor back and bring the Doctor back. And the reason that the Doctor loves their companion is always because that's their humanistic instincts. That's their human side. And I think that's what we're going to start seeing soon.
I will say, as a closing thought for myself, if we're bringing back people from timelines, I want Donna Noble back.
We could see that. That would be cool.
Yeah.
And the adipose.
We're far enough along to be able to let her be able to survive with having her memories back. So,
so how about you, Molly?
Oh boy. So I think I just enjoyed, even though it was a bit chaotic, I enjoyed the chaos. I want to see where this is going to go. To Joe's point, I think they need to reel it in just a little bit, but at the same time, I'm still enjoying it. I don't want them to fall into the pratfall, as discussed. I think that would be bad. There is a fine line between catering to fans and having a good story. And I think Doctor Who is all about having a good story. So as long as that continues, I think we'll be okay.
Agreed.
I think that I really enjoyed seeing the depth of the character of the Doctor this episode. I think we saw a lot more of her seriousness, which, of course, Capaldi, I felt that was a lot of Capaldi there.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's still, this particular generation, but I think that it's still this huge culmination of all of the timelines, all of the experiences, kind of this amalgamation of the Doctor with all of its quirks, with all of their idiosyncrasies, with all the good and the bad. And I think, to Joe's point, to someone just kind of watching the show, it keeps it interesting.
I think so.
Those are my thoughts.
I think so too. How about you, Mackenzie?
Well, definitely, I agree with everything that everyone else has said up to this point too. And I really love the direction that this show is going for this season. It really, not that last season was bad. It feels, I feel way more in touch with the Doctor, and I feel like I could almost say that 13 is very close. 12 was my new Who Doctor. So in number 5 is my Doctor. So to getting the two of them together, kind of like that feel with Jodie, it's like it's really kind of being a nostalgia. But I have to agree. I think the companions are going to ground the Doctor, and she will be pulling herself back. I do know that this season is going to end on a cliffhanger, so it's going to carry on to series 13. So we're probably going to be on for a wild roller coaster on the whole way through.
Oh, that's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Yeah, hopefully we don't have to as long though, for the next season.
Hopefully not. All right. So, Joe, where can everybody find anything for Diversely Geek?
So you can find Diversely Geek on all social media platforms. You can find our podcast on all podcast platforms just by searching Diversely Geek. Simple as that. And Whovian Complex, as well, if you're listening, you would know. I assume you can find it just as well on the same platforms. And join in discussion on social media as well if you're listening. We love to actually engage in person with everyone, and you can discuss with us online, Facebook, our Facebook group, or even live when we're watching. We're always either live tweeting or engaging via live stream sometimes that we do.
Awesome. How about you, Mackenzie?
So you can find me at MackenzieFlohr.com. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, BookBub. And you can find out about the Writer Wands, which is my main program, as well as my coaching program that will be coming out in April. That will be a personal growth / mental health program I'm very excited about.
Ooh, that's going to be interesting. And how about you, Molly?
So definitely on the Insta and the regular, the Facebooks. Sort of just beginning to kind of push out my Mollee Bloom. So if you look for at Mollee Bloom on Insta, it's just kind of starting out. Hoping to get this book out in 2020. So yay! Nice.
That's awesome. That's a great expectation too.
Yeah.
For anything for myself, you could check us out on Man Bites Media or Man Bites Film, Retro, and of course Cellar Door. All these are different podcasts, and you can find us on YouTube, iHeartRadio, et cetera, all the different platforms that you could imagine. So I'm so glad you guys were able to join us and spin all these amazing theories that we could put together and really just nerd out on Whovian mythology, because that's what we did in this episode, and that's what it was all about. So thank you guys for joining us on the Whovian Complex. And we'll see you guys next week for another episode.
Until then.
Until then.
Hasta.